A private prison can be full, paid every day, and still become almost worthless with one government signature. Not because crime disappeared, not because the building collapsed, because the contract did. So what does a private prison company actually sell? Beds, security, real estate, or something much more valuable, government capacity that can be turned on when public facilities run out of room? Keep that question open. The answer explains why an empty prison can sometimes be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and why a crowded one can become a financial disaster overnight. Okay, so you want to own a private prison. First, you cannot simply buy land, build a fence, install some cameras, and wait for customers. There is only one real customer: government, federal agencies, states, counties, immigration authorities, courts and correctional systems that need secure space, staff, transportation, food, medical care, monitoring, and paperwork completed in the exact format requested by somebody whose office still uses a fax machine. The people inside the facility are not the customers. They are the people the government is paying you to confine, supervise, transport, or help transition back into the community. That distinction drives the whole business. A hotel can advertise harder when rooms are empty. A private prison cannot offer a weekend special. It needs a contract. And that contract is where the money begins. In 2025, two of America's largest publicly traded detention and corrections companies, CoreCivic and the GEO Group, reported roughly $4.8 billion in combined revenue. CoreCivic reported about $2.2 billion. GEO reported roughly $2.63 billion. Those numbers came from a business most Americans rarely see directly: secure facilities, immigration detention, residential reentry centers, electronic monitoring, transportation, case management, and real estate designed for one purpose that is extremely difficult to convert into anything else. A closed restaurant can become another restaurant. A closed prison becomes a very secure building with terrible natural light. Before we get to profit, though, we need to answer the first mini question: how does the owner get paid? Usually, the contract sets a daily rate, often called a per diem, for each person housed in the facility. One occupied bed. One day, one payment. The rate may cover staff, food, utilities, security, programs, maintenance, and other services. Some costs may be treated separately. Every agreement is different. Simple enough. Except the facility has fixed costs whether the bed is occupied or not. The fence still exists. The control room still needs staff. The medical unit still needs to function. The lights stay on. The insurance company remains emotionally available. So, an operator does not merely want a high daily rate. It wants stable occupancy. That opens the first loop. What happens when the government cannot guarantee enough people to fill the building? Sometimes the operator takes the risk. Sometimes the contract includes a minimum payment, guaranteed availability, or an occupancy provision. In other words, the government may pay for capacity even when some beds are empty. That sounds shocking until you think about the government's problem. A detention system cannot wait 6 years for a new facility every time demand rises. It needs space now. The operator is not only selling occupied beds, it is selling readiness. An empty bed can be inventory. But here's the twist. Not every contract has a guarantee, and even a guarantee is only as strong as the contract term, the budget, and the political support behind it. The bed may be ready. The government may change its mind. We will come back to that. First, you need the property. Private correctional facilities are expensive. Land, perimeter fencing, electronic detection, housing units, control rooms, medical space, kitchens, laundry, visitation, transport, sally ports, backup generators, fire systems, communications, water, wastewater, recreation areas, classrooms, secure doors designed to survive people who strongly disagree with the concept of doors. Then there is location. The facility needs enough land and political approval, but it also needs access to courts, hospitals, airports, employees, suppliers, and families. Build too close to a city and land becomes expensive. Build too far away and staffing becomes difficult. Transportation costs rise, attorneys travel farther, and families may struggle to visit. The cheap site can become expensive, one bus ride at a time. That leads to the second revenue model. Sometimes the company operates the facility. Sometimes it owns the property and leases it to a government agency or another operator. Sometimes it does both. CoreCivic reports its business through safety, community, and property segments. Its largest segment operates correctional and detention facilities. The company also runs residential reentry centers and owns correctional real estate leased to other operators. That structure matters. Operations create service revenue. Real estate creates rent. If a government wants control over staffing but does not want to build a new facility, leasing can solve the problem. The company provides the specialized building. The government provides the operation. The prison has become a very unusual office park. Now we can close the first loop. Why can an empty facility still have value? Because secure capacity takes years and enormous amounts of capital to create. If policy changes, detention populations rise, or an agency suddenly needs thousands of beds, an idle facility can reopen much faster than a new one can be built. GEO entered 2026, describing about 6,000 available high-security idle beds that could support future contracts. Those empty beds were not producing full operating revenue, but they represented an option. Government needs capacity. The company already owns it. The empty prison is not dead real estate. It is a bet on future policy. And that opens the next loop. If idle beds can become valuable when policy changes, what happens when policy moves the other direction? This is the largest risk in the entire business. Not competition, not food cost, not electricity, politics. In January 2021, an executive order directed the U.S. Department of Justice not to renew contracts with privately operated criminal detention facilities where consistent with law. That did not eliminate every form of private detention. It did not cover every state contract. It did not end immigration detention contracts through the Department of Homeland Security. But it showed how quickly the customer can rewrite the market. A normal company worries that customers will choose a competitor. A prison company worries that its customer will decide the product should not exist. That is a different level of churn, and it explains why the industry diversified. GEO does not report only a secure facilities business. It also operates electronic monitoring, supervision, case management, reentry, and transportation services. A person may be monitored with GPS rather than held in a facility. A person leaving custody may live in a residential reentry center. A government agency may pay for transportation, reporting, treatment, or supervision. The company follows the person through different stages of the system. The locked door becomes one product inside a larger corrections platform. This is not diversification into coffee or hotels. It is diversification into different levels of control. Now ask the uncomfortable question. Does the company make more money when more people are confined? At the simplest facility level, more occupied beds usually mean more revenue. But the answer becomes less clean across a whole company. Rates differ, staffing differs, medical needs differ. Some contracts pay for availability. Some facilities are leased. Some monitoring programs generate revenue without incarceration. A full high-cost facility may produce less margin than a smaller, efficiently staffed contract. More people can mean more revenue. It can also mean more expense, more incidents, more overtime, and more scrutiny. Occupancy is not profit. It is only the beginning of the calculation. CoreCivic said combined occupancy in its safety and community segments reached 78.1% in the fourth quarter of 2025. The company also reported a facility operating margin of 22.2% for those segments during the quarter. That is strong. It is not the same as a 22-cent profit on every dollar at the corporate level. Interest, headquarters, depreciation, taxes, legal costs, and capital spending still exist. The facility margin gets the headline. The debt agreement reads the footnotes. Now let us look at the largest operating cost. People, correctional officers, medical professionals, counselors, teachers, case managers, food service staff, maintenance, transport officers, administrators, investigators, managers. The facility operates 24 hours a day. A staff shortage at 3 in the morning is not solved by opening later. Labor markets near remote facilities can be thin. Turnover can be high. Overtime becomes expensive. Training takes time. A new employee cannot be placed in a secure unit with a badge and a motivational email. Understaffing is not only a financial problem, it can become a safety problem for employees and the people held inside. The operator must balance labor cost against contract requirements and real conditions on the ground. Cut too little and the margin suffers. Cut too much and everything suffers. That line is where the ethical argument becomes a business risk. Critics of private prisons argue that profit creates pressure to reduce staffing, programs, healthcare, food quality, and other services. The companies respond that they operate under government contracts, accreditation standards, audits, and oversight, and that they provide governments with needed capacity and specialized services. The disagreement is not just philosophical, it is contractual. What exactly did the government require? How is performance measured? Who is monitoring the operator? What happens when standards are missed? And here's the next open loop. What if the government removes itself one step from the contract? In 2023, the Justice Department's Inspector General reviewed the Northeast Ohio Correctional Center. The U.S. Marshals Service had faced an expiring direct contract with a private operator after the 2021 executive order. Instead of renewing the direct private contract, the Marshals Service entered an agreement with a local government, which then contracted with the same private operator. The people stayed in the same facility. The operator remained. The legal path changed. The Inspector General found that the new arrangement could cost the federal government as much as $6 million more per year and provide less direct oversight than the previous contract. Think about that. The policy changed, the paperwork changed, the building did not. Government contracting is where a simple sentence goes to become three binders. This closes the political loop. A policy can eliminate one contract structure without eliminating the underlying need for beds near courts and attorneys. The agency still needs space. The private facility still exists. The system finds another path, sometimes a more expensive one. That does not prove privatization is always better. It proves the public alternative is not automatically simple, nearby, or available. Now open another loop. What happens when a community builds its economy around one prison contract and the facility closes? For that, go to Willacy County, Texas. The Willacy County Correctional Center became known as Tent City because much of the housing used large tent-like structures. The county financed the project through public debt, while a private company operated the facility under a federal contract. The promise was familiar: jobs, revenue, economic development, a large employer in a poor region. Then, in February 2015, an uprising damaged the facility after people held there protested conditions, including medical care. The Bureau of Prisons canceled the contract. Thousands of people were transferred. The facility closed, hundreds of jobs disappeared, and the debt stayed in Willacy County. Public reporting at the time estimated that roughly $128 million remained tied to the project. That is the darkest version of public-private partnership. The private operator can lose a contract. The county can lose an economy. The bondholders still know the address. Willacy closes another loop. The prison was supposed to create predictable revenue because federal detention demands seemed stable. But the facility depended on one contract, one building, and one relationship. That is customer concentration with razor wire. The same risk appears on corporate financial statements. A large share of industry revenue can come from a small number of government agencies. Lose one major customer and there may be no replacement. A warehouse can find a new tenant. A prison cannot become a target without a renovation budget and several difficult zoning meetings. Specialized real estate creates competitive protection. It also creates a trap. Now consider healthcare. People in custody still need treatment. Chronic conditions, mental health services, dental care, emergency transport, medication, suicide prevention, infectious disease control. The operator may provide some care directly and contract for other services. Medical cost can be unpredictable. One complex patient can cost far more than the daily payment rate. A hospital does not reduce the invoice because the government contract had a difficult quarter. Food is more predictable, but scale matters. Thousands of meals, every day, special diets, religious diets, medical diets, kitchen security, supply interruptions. A small increase per meal becomes a large annual number. A small reduction per meal also becomes a large annual number. That is why critics examine food and healthcare so closely. Tiny savings multiplied across a confined population create real money. They also affect people who cannot choose another provider. Then there is maintenance, secure doors, locks, cameras, roofs, plumbing, HVAC, vehicles, generators. A prison ages like any other building except every failure becomes more urgent. A broken air conditioner in an office creates complaints. A broken air conditioner in a secure housing unit can create a crisis. The company must invest capital even when the contract may not be renewed. That is a brutal decision. Spend millions renovating a facility with 5 years left on the agreement? Or delay work and risk performance problems? The government wants a modern facility. The operator wants a contract long enough to pay for it. The building sits between them, getting older. This is why long-term agreements matter. They create visibility, they help finance improvements, they reduce risk. They can also reduce government flexibility. Every stable contract is somebody else's limitation. Now we reach electronic monitoring. At first, this looks like the opposite of prison ownership. No cell, no perimeter fence, no giant kitchen, just devices, software, call centers, field staff, case management, and data. But monitoring can fit the same customer need. The government wants supervision at a lower level of confinement. The company provides technology and services. The capital requirement per person can be far lower than building a prison. The program can scale faster. The operating margin may behave differently. And the political argument changes. Supporters see an alternative to detention. Critics worry about surveillance, technical failures, fees, privacy, and the expansion of control to people who otherwise might not have been monitored. The prison company has moved beyond the prison. That is the real answer to the opening question. What does the company sell? Not cells, not exactly. It sells outsourced control. A secure bed is one form, a reentry center is another, a GPS device is another, transportation is another, case management is another. The government decides the level. The contractor provides the infrastructure. Now imagine the optimistic version. You own a modern facility in a region where government capacity is genuinely limited. The contract is long-term. The daily rate adjusts for inflation and wages. Occupancy is stable. Staffing is adequate. Turnover is manageable. The facility passes inspections. Medical care and programs meet requirements. The debt is reasonable. The government receives secure capacity faster than it could build its own facility. The company earns a return. The community receives jobs. The arrangement functions. That is the pitch. Now the bad version. You build in a remote county because land is cheap and officials want development. The project uses debt. The contract is shorter than the financing. Staffing is difficult. Overtime rises. Medical costs rise. Incidents attract lawsuits and public scrutiny. A new administration changes policy. The contract expires. The government moves people elsewhere. The company closes the facility. The county loses jobs. The specialized building sits empty. The debt continues. The prison has no prisoners. Everybody is still locked into something. That is the trap. A private prison is a real estate business tied to political demand, a service business tied to human safety, and a government contractor tied to one customer that can change the rules. The walls are fixed. Policy moves. The most profitable moment may arrive when government suddenly needs capacity. The most dangerous moment arrives when the owner mistakes temporary demand for permanent demand. So should a private company earn money from incarceration? That is the moral question, and there is no honest way to hide it behind accounting. Supporters argue that private operators provide flexibility, specialized facilities, competition, and capacity without requiring government to build everything itself. Critics argue that incarceration creates a conflict that no contract can fully solve. The company benefits financially from keeping facilities occupied, while society should benefit from needing fewer of them. The spreadsheet cannot settle that argument. It can only reveal where the incentives sit. And now we can close the main loop. A private prison company does not really own the demand. Government does. The company owns a building, staff, systems, and the ability to respond when the government needs space. The valuable product is capacity. The dangerous assumption is permanence. One signature can activate an empty facility. Another can empty a full one. The lock is on the cell door. The real risk is inside the contract.